All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to welcome you to the University Express with the Erie County Services free lifelong learning program for older adults. And thank you all for being here in support of the program, as well as Judy. Senior Services is focused on connecting older adults with local resources that meet their unique needs. They offer so many great programs and services. There's truly something for everyone. The State Fit Dining Program, frozen pickup, and nutritional counseling. So if you're looking for any additional information, you can stop by the table afterwards and we can answer them. Before we start the program, please make sure your cell phones are either off or on silence. It is a huge distraction and one of the #1 complaints of the speakers. So please make sure that they are either off or that they are on silence. University Express classes are offered in over 26 sites. And this today is actually Grand Island's last University Express. So we're going out with a big bang. The bathrooms, if you could, to minimize the distractions, go out the back and directly across. You will find the restrooms. And I'm trying to think, it is being videotaped. You can view it at a later time on the YouTube channel for Erie County. No one here will be on video, but anything you say is going to be on audio. So your questions and anything. So just be aware. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce Judy Buzby. After working as a nurse in Western New York for 38 years, Judy retired and has enjoyed many years of genealogical research. Finding interesting things about her family tree has opened up the past for her and has increased her understanding of the joys and hardships that her forefathers lived through. So welcome to Judy for presenting today. Hello. I might have turned my gifts. Oh.
Am I on?
Now you are.
Hello.
There you go.
Hello. My name is Harriet Elizabeth Chapin Barnard, but you can call me Hattie.
Except for you.
And I was born in 1851. I was born in 1851. When I was in my 80s, I decided to write down my memories of the events and the adventures that I had during the momentous time in our American history. Sorry about this. I got it. I fixed it. Nope, I didn't.
Is it Ruth's yet? Carrie just stepped out, didn't she?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just hold it gingerly. My story was published in the News Record, the newspaper from our hometown, Rahway, New Jersey. And it was published during the summer of 1933. Here are some of the things that I remembered. When I was about 7, I was beginning to be deeply interested in what was going on about me and to ask the reason of things. At this time, there was much discussion of slaves and the threat of war that produced a very, very restless feeling, intense atmosphere everywhere. We lived in New Jersey, and these discussions kept our home in a constant state of excitement. Startling events followed each other with such thrilling rapidity that they imprinted themselves forever on my memory. I listened to the heated discussions about slavery that were constantly going on at our house between neighbors and friends. Many of the present day problems had their beginnings: immigration, temperance, suffrage, and the endless tariff that was one of the fundamental causes of the Civil War. My recollections was that New Jersey was on the border of the South. Only one vote of her lieutenant governor, a resident of our town and a staunch friend of my father's, kept the state in the Union. We were in fear for his life too, most of the time because the Southern sympathizers were in and around our town and were threatening him. In 1851, Harriet Beecher Stowe, we all know Harriet Beecher Stowe, she came out with her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I quote from my father's diary, "This book is a torch that will set the North on fire." So indeed it was. She showed up the good and bad side of slavery, and the people that took it up could not lay it down until it was finished. They laughed and cried over Topsy, Eva, and Uncle Tom. The North went wild over it, and it was a most popular book. Father would read and reread it to us until long after the war. From the advent of this book, the opposite forces were girding themselves for a terrible struggle. The great men of the North, on both sides, entered the strife. Everyone felt that the time was soon coming when the country must stand for or against slavery. All of this was drilled into me until I knew it by heart. What impressed me the most was the stubborn devotion to the idea that each were right, regardless of the facts. Does that sound familiar? They held on to a fanaticism that would disrupt their country rather than make the least small compromise. Father could see the handwriting on the wall and said to the leaders of Rahway, New Jersey, "This means war and nothing else. We might as well face it and get ready for it. Let us organize and drill." How very sober these men looked as they talked in hushed voices, as though loath to accept his verdict. But with Father's leadership, they formed a group that studied war tactics in the library of our house. It was my delight to sit by Father's desk and watch him building 3 little artillery sets with cannon and caissons, 6 inches high and perfect in every detail. The group used these models to study those tactics so that when the war did break out, he had men trained, recruit, and train others. I know every detail of the little cannon and the right movements it commanded. When the war was declared, Father volunteered in the New Jersey militia and was appointed captain. When Lincoln issued call for troops, there was a rush to enlist, which nearly emptied the town of our best young men. His work training the group of men from the town became a blessing to bring order out of this chaos of people leaving and not knowing where they were going. He organized and sent to the front 2 New Jersey's efficient batteries. He then began to organize a 3rd company, which was ready in time to participate at the Battle of Gettysburg. But Father would have liked to see battle, but he worked hard and was recognized and respected for his leadership in training and organizing the men of New Jersey. Before I begin my story of the war years, I must give you some background about my wonderful family and my home and how they all affected my recollections. My father, John Reuben Chapin, was a noted woodcut illustrator and watercolor artist. He was the first art director of Harper's Magazine in 1860. And during the war years, he actually illustrated many of A.H. Ward's sketches that were sent from the battlefront. During the 1850s, my father made a living illustrating patents for many of the important inventors of the day. Cyrus McCormick of Reaper fame, thank you. Walter Hunt, who invented the original Springfield rifle, and George Gordon, who invented the hand printing press. Father was also a statesman and original thinker. He met and had friendships with important writers and politicians of the age. My close association with him was my true education. He did several commissions of paintings in black and white, India ink and gouache during the Civil War. I have brought one of today, and unfortunately, we don't have a way to show it. If you could just lift it up. It is heavy, but not too bad. I can lift it. This is one of the first large paintings, and it was an order from the 116th New Jersey Cavalry Company. They wanted a picture showing the death of Colonel McVicker at the Spotsylvania Courthouse. This was a tremendously important event in our family. It was his first big picture and was to be hung in the company's drill room as a testimonial to the respect for their commander. Such an excited group we were when he began the picture. He painted it in our barn. And how we studied his work and helped him to make it realistic. We were very young. He actually let me put on a pair of pants, and I posed for the young sharpshooter in the painting. Finally, the picture was done and ready to be delivered. Oh, how proud we were of it. Then out of the blue sky came the crushing word that most of the regiment had been killed and that only 3 were left to tell the tale. It was never to be delivered, and it still hangs in our home today. Thanks. I received my education at a private school where I learned reading, writing, multiplication, dancing, the French language, and how to dine properly. This was all that was required of girls at that time. My father and mother read to us, and we discussed the current events of the day. They also provided us with some of the best books to be had. Many of these Father illustrated for the publishers. Father shaped my life and encouraged me to think for myself and become an independent woman. Remember, in those days, a woman's place was at the 4 walls of her home. She married, she had children, made cloth, stitched it into clothing, grew food, cooked and baked, and many times educated her children. If she desired to do anything else, she kept it to herself, for it was considered a disgrace to even dream of independence. I recall how Father felt when, as a young lady, I wanted to earn my own living. He thought it a reflection on his ability to provide for me. Later, he realized my mistake and gave me the training I wanted. My mother also colored my life and provided me with an example of a person who took hold of her problems with cheerfulness. During the hectic times of the war years, she never faltered in her duty to her family. She was a wonderful mother and a tower of strength to my father. In 1857, we suffered a crushing blow in the death of my brother and sister. Henry, a boy of 7, was my idol and my father's pride and joy. And the youngest, Isabella, a bright and active 2-year-old, was the light of our lives. At that time, there were no immunizations or antibiotics, and it was very common for children to die at a young age. I was 6, and with this tragedy, became the eldest in the family. My sister, Freelove, was 3. Will would be born that year, and Charles and Harry were born in 60 and 62. With the loss of my brother, I became very close to my father and enjoyed a rare companionship. He took me on short trips and introduced me to many interesting people of the time. Our dinner table discussions were always lively, with arguments about slavery, states' rights, and the tariff, pro and con. As we grew older, he encouraged us to write in our journals and document the important events of the day. There were many brilliant debates at our home by leading men of the day, and these arguments impressed themselves deeply upon me, young as I was. Remember, I was only 10 when the war broke out. At the house, we had 2 free colored servants, a husband and wife, who cared for the house and grounds. They also had 5 children who were a little older than my siblings and I, and they were our playmates and friends during this time. Having these servants caused great problems at our home, as there were many Southern sympathizers around town, and they often rounded up the colored free men and sent them back down south to be sold. We were worried that they would take our servants and make them slaves. Not only that, but just before the war, the Rahway Arsenal was blown up by the Southern sympathizers, causing tremendous excitement and much anxiety to my parents. Much of the extra munitions were rescued, and taken to our barn. Later, this was the cause of our barn being burned, with the loss of many of our animals. Our house was also threatened to be burned, but Mother would never tell the sympathizers where our colored servants were hidden. They kept out of the way during the day and slept in the trees in the orchard at night. Mother's ready wit and the fact that all of us children were ill with the measles was what saved the house and our faithful servants. I think the memory that stays with me the most about the war years is the sound of the Pennsylvania Railroad as it pulled into the Rahway station at the end of our street. The railroad came from New York City and passed right through to Washington. It was the right of way for the troops going south and those returning wounded or dead to the north. It was also often filled with officials of our nation, and we were in a wonderful place to make acquaintance with these statesmen. 2 quick toots of the whistle told us that a train with fresh troops full of enthusiasm and adventure were coming through town to fight the battles of the South. My sister, Freelove, and I would go running down the road to cheer them on. The oldest Negro girl, Tilly, would tie a rope around her waist, and have us attached at either end. And as she was entrusted with our safety, it was a comical sight and caused no end of amusement to the neighborhood. The return trains were another entirely different from those going south. They kept us in a state of excited sympathy all the time. The lone, mournful toot of an engine proclaiming the approach of an ambulance train, which crawled slowly and softly into the depot. This was a signal for us to grab up a basket of goodies that Mother always kept on hand and rush up the short street to the station and distribute our sandwiches and cookies as best as we could to those maimed and crippled soldiers. Men who had so gallantly started out but a short time before. Whenever we knew there was a battle that was going on, Mother would have a number of baskets of goodies packed so that when we heard the mournful toot toot, we were ready to dash to the depot. Oh, the sight of those men on those cattle trains with only slabs of wood for bunks. None of the comforts of present day, and yet it was all that could be done at that time. Some of the trains brought exchange prisoners from the Libby prison. They were terribly thin, filthy, sick, starved human creatures. Several of these we knew, and they were taken off the train to our house. Here we gave them a bath in our only bathtub, the wash tub in the basement, and then gave them clean clothes. Those forlorn and sick men were fed up and put to bed and often slept for 48 hours. They were so very grateful to my parents. 4 short toots from the train demanded right away for officials of the nation. When we heard the 4 toots, we knew we would meet some important people. Freelove and I would take some choice fruit and hasten to the station. The conductors all knew us and would send us to the right car, where we would get acquainted with many of the celebrities of the day. During the war and the disbanding of the Army, we had shaken hands with the president, most of his cabinet, and many of the generals and officers of the Army on the train. That brings me to my most cherished memory of my meetings with the great emancipator, the rail splitter, the man who now belongs to the ages, Abraham Lincoln. These memories also revolve around the train. On the occasion when Lincoln passed through Rahway on the campaign trail in 1860, Father and the people of the town staged a demonstration so that we could see the interesting man from the wild and woolly West. I was selected to present him with a basket of fruit, some flowers, and wish him Godspeed. So vivid were my recollections and impressions of that time that I have never forgotten how I thought he was such a homely man and that I was very frightened. He was tall, loose jointed, awkward, with a large mouth, deep sunken eyes that were sad yet keen, heavy eyebrows and rumpled hair, which made him look disorderly. His face seemed so serious, and his complexion was that of a man accustomed to living out of doors. He seemed so awkward as he bowed and waved his hat to the crowd. They acted doubtful on how just to take him. I too felt uncertain, but when he spoke, his face lit up, and merry twinkles occurred in the corner of his eyes. His voice was kindly and dispelled my fears as he reached down with a long pair of arms and lifted me up to the railing in front of him, holding me there while I gave my little speech. He then stooped and kissed me on the cheek and said in a low voice, "Will you wish me luck, my dear?" Then he carefully handed me back to my father. What fascinated me most, though, about him was the wart on his face, which kept bobbing up and down as he spoke. I could not take my eyes off of it. I made a note of this in my journal, and Father chided me for being so trivial. Okay. Another thing that claimed my attention that day was his very long legs and the misfit of his clothing. I was used to military precision and courtly manners, and he seemed so different as I sized him up. When he removed his plug hat that accentuated his height and waved it to the crowd, I was dubious about his being fit for a high position. He looked like a man from the farm. The last I saw him that day was when he ducked his head in an awkward way to enter the door of the car as it slowly moved on. In spite of his unprepossessing appearance, there was something about him that gave me confidence in him. It must have been his innate nobility of character that refuted the idea that he was a boob or a clodhopper. Lincoln was elected in 1860, in spite of the sneers, ridicule, and contempt of some of the intellectual and cultured people of the East. There were bitter feelings, and there were many people, even in the North, who could not understand how a man of the soil, the rail splitter, the slave hound, these were epithets flung at him in derision, could be trusted to fill the highest post in the land. Even Father expressed the undercurrent of thought and doubt when he said, "I like his arguments. They are sound, but will he be big enough to fill the place?" There was much dread for Lincoln's safety, too, on his trip to Washington from New York City for his inauguration. There was great fear that he would be assassinated at that point. The feeling was so bitter that some of my father's friends tried to induce Lincoln to take the Pennsylvania Railroad through Rahway and stop over at the crossroads out of town, where Father would meet him and bring him to our house. The plans went so far that our house was put to order for him. The colored folk were forbidden to show themselves, and the young children were sent away so that nothing could leak out. I felt very proud and anxious to see this important man again. My disappointment was keen when we found that Lincoln would not have it so, but changed his plans and arrived in Washington secretly, but safely at night. After my interviews with Lincoln, I was eager to see all I could about him. I was able to follow his course because father, as a captain in the New Jersey militia, was in Washington frequently. He brought home firsthand information, as well as the latest gossip of the White House. I had another occasion to meet Lincoln when we were visiting in Trenton on the train. Father was ordered to meet some officers near Washington, and as usual, he took me with him. Father placed me in the corner of a seat with caution to be quiet and ladylike. Lincoln was walking up and down with his head bowed and hands behind his back, and then he saw me. He slouched into the seat beside me, twisting his long legs around each other, looked at me with a twinkle in his eyes and said, "Well, little maid, what have you been doing with yourself lately?" And of course I said, "Studying French. And Papa says if I will write him a nice letter, he will give me $5. With that, Lincoln rattled off a lot of words that confused me and ended up with "Parlez-vous français?" That I surely understood. After a hearty laugh, I said, "I don't think I have studied that far." He replied, "Well, neither have I, little maid, but if you will write me a letter in French, I will see you get that $5. We both laughed as he patted me on the head and said goodbye. Unfortunately, I never wrote that letter as I was seriously ill shortly afterwards. As we were nearing the station and father was coming to get me, the president shook my father's hands and asked him, "Are the arrangements satisfactory, Chapin?" Then passed on. When next I saw him, he was in his coffin. The 4 years of the war was tense, and there was nervous strain on the nation. Finally came the end of hostilities in the surrender of General Robert E. Lee. It sent a wave of the deepest gratitude all through the North. This was short-lived as the shocking news of Lincoln's assassination was flashed around the world. It was a staggering blow out of a clear sky. I will always remember the day when Lincoln's body passed through Rahway. There were people lined up, waiting with eyes filled with tears and hearts gripped with dread. The sky was overcast, and the long roll of distant thunder seemed to protest against a great cruel deed. One sorrowful toot of the engine gave notice of the approaching train. It crawled softly along as though not to disturb its distinguished passenger. Father was the master of ceremonies for the town and was stationed at the platform with other officials and their families. Tears streaming down their faces, hats lifted from bowed heads and hearts aching for the death of this man who had so successfully piloted a nation through such a desperate struggle. As the crepe-draped car with the coffin in the center covered by the star-spangled banner slowly crawled by, a great sob went up. Suddenly, all this changed. It was discovered that one of the influential men in town stood with his head up and had refused to take off his hat. In an instant, he was picked up and thrown in front of the slowly moving train. He was rescued and put on a train and later dumped into the salt marshes between Newark and Jersey City. He never returned to our town. As the train moved on, the men clasped their hands and shook their heads, expressing the doubt and fear in their hearts that some serious calamity would follow this dastardly assassination. I have always felt that it was a great credit to the leaders and to the common people of our country that the fears came to nothing, and we were able to put the war behind us and to continue towards our destiny. There was another movement during that time, and it started before I was born, but it touched my life shortly after the Civil War. It enlisted my interest and was called the temperance cause. I saw many of our best young men go to the dogs through the evil of liquor. It was therefore a matter of vital importance to me. In the days after the war, liquor was so abundant and freely indulged in by the young men that the question of temperance claimed the attention of many thinking people. Father took it on himself to induce several of the leading young men in town to join him in organizing a series of private theatricals. Everyone entered into this scheme enthusiastically, except a few church members. They were assisted by a very young minister and read my mother out of the church for daring to take part in such a movement, even if it was to provide wholesome amusement and keep the young men out of the saloons. Being a generous contributor to the church, she was soon reinstalled. Father and a number of prominent artists of the day painted scenes for a little hall donated and fitted up as a theater by a wealthy printer from New York City. This little company soon grew and attracted some leading actors and was frequently invited to play for charity events. Several of our young men were started on honorable careers through this endeavor. In those days, people did not adjust themselves as quickly as we do in this age of fast thinking and living. This period in my life, spent in the turmoil of war and military training, had a gripping influence on my thoughts and development and taught me to appreciate and seek to uphold the traditions and ideals that our forefathers had striven so earnestly to create. These ideals have made this country what it is today, and they help us to understand why people from all over the world find our country a desirable place to live. We all have much to be proud about and have confidence that the elected officials of our government will provide the people of America the leadership to continue on this path of greatness. Thank you. I would encourage any questions. I do like to answer questions. If you want to know a little bit more about Hattie, I wish I knew more about her, but there are some things that if you'd like to ask the question.
That's a great story. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Birth.
1851.
Good.
And she died in 1950. Yep, she was almost 100. Yes.
Do you know anything about her life after?
I do know she was married and had 3 or 4 children, and that her husband died young, and she was my great-grandfather's secretary because he was a physician on the west side of Buffalo, and she was his secretary for a while, and she was big in temperance. I've done some research there, and she was in the temperance in Chicago, temperance movement in Chicago. But I would love to find out where she went to school or how she was trained. Yes, question.
You related to her?
Yes.
Would you repeat what that was? I don't.
Okay. She was the daughter of my great-great-great-grandfather. And my great-grandfather and my grandfather and my father are all first sons of the first son. And they are also first sons of the first sons from Deacon Samuel Chapin, who actually Springfield, Massachusetts. He founded Springfield, Massachusetts. So they were the first son of the first son of the first. We can follow it all the way down to my dad. So it's really interesting. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming, and I did enjoy doing this. And another question.
That town?
No, but there is a statue in the town that is supposedly Deacon Samuel Chapin, but it was done by Godin, who did work in Washington, and he took that from a picture that someone painted of my Deacon Samuel Chapin.
I wonder if there's information at that library.
Probably,
Yeah.
but not about Hattie, because Hattie, this was 1645, and Hattie was born in the 1800s. So, but there are ways, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. Another question? No, it's just fun. Yeah, yes, but I did get it online, and it really is not a replica. It's just, it'd be nice. Yes,
Did
question.
you inherit any artifacts from that time?
Yes, from the 1800s, I did. I have Deacon Samuel's, not Deacon Samuel, John Reuben Chapin, who was my great-great-grandfather. I have much of his artwork. I have three big scenes from the Civil War, plus I have a lot of watercolors.
Excellent.
And I have, he and his wife had a 50th wedding anniversary in Buffalo. And I have the pictures from it and all of the responses from people that said they could come or they couldn't come. It's all in a scrapbook. So that's kind of neat.
Lovely. Are you related to the naming of the Chapin in Buffalo?
That is the family, but it is not, it's a distant cousin. And it was from the Civil War. This guy, and I always thought it was Serenius Chapin that it was named after, because Serenius Chapin was during the burning of Buffalo. And he was a physician during that time, and he was captured and he got away. And I always thought that's why that it was Chapin Parkway, but no, it was from the Civil War. I looked that up.
Have you been to the cemetery at all where they're buried and?
John R., I don't know where he's buried. They said, I just don't at this point. And I don't know where Hattie is either, because I think she went back to Chicago, where she died. Yeah, Chris.
Is there a particular reason why you picked Hattie's story to tell and not another descendant?
Thank you. Yes, because when I was doing my research, I talked to someone, a third, fourth cousin removed in California. And he was a descendant of Hattie's family, Barnard family. And he was able to contact someone and they said, oh, we have this typewritten memoir that Hattie did when she was 84. And so they sent it to him and he sent it to me. So that's how I got the memoir. But she did it as each week for this newspaper, she would do a series. So that's another thing I need is to get the original copy from the newspaper. But most of them are, most of them are her actual words. That's kind of neat because in the beginning of her memoir, she talks about remembering washing clothes in a bucket. And then and she's 80, so it was in probably in the 30s. And she talks about the washing machines and how the radios and the big ships. And she goes on and in the beginning of it. It's a very interesting memoir. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention.